First off, I want to thank the brave men and women who work behind the wall. I want to thank them on a national level because their job goes unrecognized.
How do they try to turn a guard?
Well, correctional officer. Sorry, I apologize. But correctional officer. How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi, host of Tier Talk. Guys, we got a great question that could potentially be used on a supervisor exam or interview. And I'm going to forward it over to my panel of experts as well as myself. We're going to answer it. And the question is basically, how do we make sure our staff really understands, remembers, and complies with policies and procedures? Now, we're all going to provide a different perspective. It's a video that I find to be very informative. If you're looking to become a supervisor or you're already a supervisor, this is a video you definitely want to check out. Now, guys, if you haven't, the show Tier Talks True, you brave men and women that work in corrections, so please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. That bell is going to notify you every time I post a video. We're going to go to our sponsor, and when we come back, let's talk about the best ways that just in general we can get people to remember and comply with our policies and procedures. Stand by.
I wanted to attend a university that had an intelligence program. I wanted to look at problems different. I wanted to increase my critical thinking abilities. AMU offered those avenues to expand. Obtaining your degree as an adult, you're actually paying yourself and investing in yourself. You can't put a dollar on it, it's priceless. It's something that can never be taken away from you.
American Military University. Learn from the leader.
Guys, Inmate Manipulation is a course that is highly needed. It's the process that's so slow moving and subtle that you don't realize it's happening. When inmates choose to manipulate, they manipulate our need to react. Situational awareness and insight is going to save your career. It's going to save you from doing foolish things. Listen to your gut. So the more insight we have, the more we can recognize what isn't so overt, and we can correct our behavior before we fall into a trap that we can't get out of. If you allow an inmate to pull you out of your prescribed role, you are opening up a door for a host of problems. Inmate Manipulation, the psychology behind inmate manipulation. Available now. Link in description. Thank you guys for listening to our sponsor. So for me to make sure people are remembering policy, that they're mindful, is I myself have to know policy. So yes, supervisors, you have to know the policies of the areas that you are supervising. Know it like the back of your hand. Because what you want to do is you want to make sure that if you catch anybody that starts to stray, because usually there's small little steps. I'm not talking about people that are intentionally breaking policy, just that sometimes we become complacent, and that's a slow and subtle enemy. So the more informed you are about policy, you're able to see those little breakaways, and then you could jump on staff immediately and say, hey, wait a second, why are you doing it that way? Quickly, guys, this is what policy says. Make sure you're mindful of that policy. Plus, it's not a bad idea to get those new boots connected with those senior COs. Because again, you got the experience of the senior COs, but when you have those new boots coming in, all they know is pretty much policy. They may not know so much of how it could be applied, but they should have some type of book knowledge. So you can balance that, yes, with experience, and senior staff can show you how that specific policy could apply to that facility. But with that said, it's still great to kind of have those rookies remind those senior staff, like, this is what policy says, because they may remind them by just asking certain questions, which may cause senior staff to go back and say, you know what, let me review that. You may be right. Because the last thing you want is complacency breeding complacency. You really got to make sure that that policy is the root of that training, and then again, the senior officers can complement with how that's applied. But again, be on top of policy. Make sure you know it like the back of your hand as a supervisor, and do not let people break away from it. Don't let it happen, because the moment they do, it puts everybody at risk. What's your thoughts, Soto?
Welcome, guys. Retired Major Luis Soto here. Answering another question posed to us, which goes like, what is the most challenging part of maintaining knowledge of, complying with institutional policies, procedures? And there's many things throughout my career that I found challenging, about new policies or procedures or keeping track of changes, but I'll just pick one for now. The most challenging, I believe, was the interpretation of policies. You know, everyone can read a post order, everyone can read a memo, a directive, a policy, whether it be an old one or a new one, and have their own interpretation of what it means or what they're actually, the person that came up with the policy procedure, what they actually want to occur. Throughout my career, I've had many times had to clarify and basically take those inferences out when people start reading a policy and take their own judgments or preconceived ideas and say, this is what the writer actually wants. This is what the policy really intends to do. So sometimes in the writing of the policy, we lose the actual goal of what we're trying to achieve. So it's very important that we pay attention as to what is the final outcome that we're looking for when we are putting forth some policies and procedures. Some of the best ways that I found to be able to dispel anything or any inferences or differences in how people view or interpret policy was to have, obviously, supervisor meetings or meetings with my subordinates and explaining, this is the policy that's in place, this is the reason for the policy. We know that many policies are in place or are written because there was an incident that stipulated or mandated that this policy be put into place or practice, and bringing that forward kind of clarifies the reason why we're doing that particular rule, regulation, or policy. So, again, I gotta stress and the fact that being informed is the best way to actually get your point across, get policies to be actually followed. And always follow-up is the best idea. So I hope that this answer has helped you. Just keep those questions coming. We will attempt and try to give you as much information as we have that is dwelled on from our experiences, drawn from our own experiences, and all the time that we put in. We love sharing information with you guys. Again, take care, good luck, stay safe.
Hi, Connie Alleyne from the Civilian Corrections Academy. Interesting question today. It is, what's the most challenging part about maintaining knowledge of, complying with, and enforcing all institutional policies, rules, procedures, and regulations? I'm just going to get right to the point. As a civilian, we live at the intersection of two identities. We're a civilian, we're not custody, but we kind of are. There's these expectations that they have of us, right? So safety and security first. That is not what we're initially trained to do. We come in as service providers, and so the focus is the service you're providing and being an expert in your field. And when it's required for us to take on a knowledge base that we've not really been exposed to or that we're uncertain of, it can create some confusion. So what I've found is I've had to constantly go through policies and procedures. I've had to maintain close relationships with DOC leadership so that I could have questions about policies and directives and such that come down to make sure, one, that I'm interpreting it properly, two, that once I do have that interpretation, what are my limitations as far as who I can share it with, because different policies allow for sharing at different levels. And the other thing is relevance. For civilians, many times there's this feeling that these policies have no relevance to me. Like, what do I need to know about transportation? What do I need to know about whatever, right? And our reality is that we need to be in the know. We need to know so that there's no misunderstandings when we see something and we don't quite understand why something is happening. You know, a show or two ago, we talked about like the front gate officer and what that individual's requirements are being at the front gate. Many civilians simply don't know. I mean, okay, yes, there's a security process. That's what we know, right? And yes, there's some, I can't bring in certain items. But when those policies change and then the person at the front has a different requirement of you, if you don't know the policy, you don't know how it's changed, and no one's telling you that it's changed, it's very difficult. So for me, it's keeping close to the policies, is understanding what they are, understanding how they apply to the population, well, to my my employees, not to the population, and being able to meet and talk about them. You know, sometimes it's great being able to sit in the custody leadership meetings and get that understanding and sort of their perspective, because we simply don't have that perspective. So in a nutshell, I would just say relevance to civilians is really one of the big things. Speaking with custody so that cross-functional training, cross-functional collaboration is essential, especially as it relates to policies, procedures, directives, any new expectations that are coming down that need to be articulated or trickled down to the staff so that they're not in any way in violation or in a state of non-compliance just because they don't know any better. Till next time, stay safe, know your policies, they protect us, they guide us, whether we like them or not. Sometimes we know that they're stupid, but we kind of got to do what we got to do, right? Whether we agree or disagree. I don't want to say that they're stupid because they're usually founded or grounded in best practices and things that we've known to be successful in other systems. All right, so Connie Alleyne, Civilian Corrections Academy. Till next time.
What's the most challenging part of reading, reinforcing, and retaining thousands of pages of dry and ever-evolving policy and procedure? Well, for me, from a line staff perspective, I feel like that's because the way we do things on a daily basis, our day-to-day operations, differ ever so slightly from the policies and procedures. And I think that stems from the way that we were trained, the fact that this is the way that things have always been, right? And it's not necessarily that we're operating outside of policy and procedure in the beginning, but we kind of drift away from that. And if you have new staff or new officers that come on and they see the veteran staff doing something, that's the way they're taught, that's the way the FTO operates, then that's how they're going to do it. And a lot of people don't take the time to read and refer to all of those policies, especially if it doesn't pertain to the position that they're currently in. For example, if you're not in the kitchen, if you're not working the chow hall, you're probably not going to read the policy on what a kitchen officer should do, right? Well, the problem is at some point you may be thrusted into that position and you need to know what's going on. Plus, just for your general information, it helps. But I know that like at the beginning of every year, they start revising these policies, updating the policies, and then sending them out for staff to sign off on. And you get hit and inundated with policy after policy after policy, 15, 20, 30 new policies coming out every year, or updated policies coming out every year. And it's a lot to take on, especially right now in this climate, in this environment with what we got going on in the world, where the entire planet is shutting down. Is an officer really going to take time to read the employee grooming standards or the what the key control officer does? Probably not. And I think that's just because of the way that it's rolled out, and maybe the tiny level of complacency that staff develop over time. So for me, that would be the biggest the biggest challenge is number one, that's the way that we always do it or have done it. And number two, just kind of the general way we feel after being beat down for so many years about the policy. I will say that it's really important to know and to understand those policies. You don't have to have all of them memorized, but you should be able to know where to find them and at least kind of a general knowledge of where you can go to reference those things. But policies like your use of force policy and things like that, you kind of need to know. So what some officers do, and what a good friend of mine used to do, is he'd read a policy a day, and he would just run through. And it took him a while to get there, but he would ask questions, we would discuss them, we would kind of quiz each other and have a little bit of fun with it. So, all right, guys, I hope this helps. Until next time, be smart, stay safe, stay sane, and we'll talk soon.
Hey there, Tier Tuck fans. Russ Hamilton from Keepers of Chaos. Anyway, Anthony asked me to do a quick video, and this is a continuation, really, of a series that we started with regards to questions that you might get asked during an interview. So that's kind of the basis that I'm attacking this from. And this particular question is what is the most challenging part of maintaining knowledge and complying with and enforcing institutional rules, regulations, procedures, laws, and that kind of thing? As you start out and you approach this particular business from the career viewpoint, what you start to see is that over time things change. And, those changes, sometimes they can be almost at that glacial pace, even though there's a lot of incentive and there's a lot of, let's hurry up and get this done kind of thing behind them. Because when you come out with a new policy or a procedure, sometimes, a lot of times, it's really based on learning something that you didn't know before that involved safety and security. And hopefully that's what most policies and procedures are based on. And if you're not passing out that learning curve to your staff, if you're not training them up in the way they should go, you're setting yourself up for failure again, because a lot of these things happen because failure happened once. And if you don't watch it, failure is going to happen again. I think probably the most challenging thing, though, is when we get ourselves into these situations where we're changing, maybe not because of a particular incident that happened or something that we found out that was lacking or some security threat, but when we're changing because we found out that the way that we've been doing it all along is wrong. And I kind of harken back to my CDC days. When I first started out, it was one of those things where, you had an incident or something, and maybe it was some guys fighting, a little riot, maybe it was an attack on staff, and everyone just kind of waded in, and you ended up in a big dog pile, and everybody got hurt. The inmates got hurt, staff got hurt, and it was just kind of done willy-nilly. And what we finally started to do is we started to develop a real, alarm response and disturbance control protocol. And those protocols led us to, really start looking at the way we were responding to things, who was responding, the type of equipment that we had. We finally got pepper spray. And all that was great. And we were having success with it on the yards. But sometimes, for some reason, things would just revert back. And you'd go back, and instead of, waiting for enough staff to show up, sometimes people would just go charging in. And sometimes, it was just, what the policy is, but maybe you haven't really practiced and trained it enough. And maybe that when the bovine fecal excrement starts hitting the fan, you just revert to that last phase of training that you were in because you haven't had enough time to really switch over. And so I think that that's the real problem that we face. And that's just an example where it's really obvious. When we change, maybe more minor policies, we don't see it maybe as much, or we don't understand it, but people revert back. And so instead of reverting back, what we have to do is, and this is the way we have to implement it, is we really have to start hitting that training curve. And training once isn't not enough. Twice is not enough. 3 times, not enough. We still have to be going there and explaining this to people and having them implement it and making them invested in the changeover. So anyway, that's my opinion on what the hardest parts of, maintaining all of this stuff as all these new procedures and stuff come in. It's been the same for a lot of law enforcement agencies across the land. You get a new Supreme Court decision that starts affecting, how you're doing traffic stops and what you can look for and what you can say and, whether you can, have a pretext stop. Look at like Terry v. Ohio. I won't go into all that one here and stuff, but just go look it up, Terry v. Ohio, and see how that changed, about when you can pat down for weapons and when you can pat down for drugs and all of those things. It's a lot to take in. And you measure that out over the course of an entire career, man, there's a lot of knowledge and procedures that fall by the way, and a lot of new ones come in and take their place. And so, really, you have to absolutely adapt and grow or just fade away. Anyway, that's my thoughts on the subject. I'm Russ Hamilton. I'm signing off. Everyone, man, living in troubled times. Stay aware, stay frosty, stay safe, people.